Welcome to the March 8th edition of the PFF Forecast. We have a fantastic show because we have brought in, fresh off of vacation, he is rested, his mind is sharp, and just in time to talk about Rodgers, Jackson, and Carr, the quarterback shakeups, what that all means, some takes from the combine results as well. Is Seth all the way in on Anthony Richardson, CJ Stroud? Still a Bryce Young fan? Who knows? We're going to find out. And then we've got Arjun coming on. We're going to talk about some great betting opportunities, both draft props that are new and have been released. And at long last, we have golf with Brad Spielberger. It's going to be a fantastic show. Let's rock. While I was reading while I was doing the intro, Seth looked disdainful at the thought of golf. What, not manly enough for you?
No, it's too old for me. Like the second I decide it's golf season in my life, it's over.
Not all of us are star quarterbacks for our flag football team.
Oh. So it's more of a mind. It's.
No, I'm sorry.
I'm just trying to.
What is going on?
Oh, let's start over. Yeah, let's start over the whole show. I cut off. That was weird. I didn't mean to interrupt you at all.
That's the golf gods.
No, I'm sorry about that. Start over and go ahead. That's my bad.
Here we go. I'll just start, Ethan. I'll just start from after the intro. 3, 2, 1. During that intro, it looked like Seth wanted to punch the camera when I brought up golf. What's wrong? It's not manly enough for you?
It's not that it's not manly enough for me. It's too old for me. And I know a lot of young people play golf. I get it. But for me, golf is an old man sport. And the second I decide I'm going to be a golfer, I got to hang up everything else. It's over. Like, I'm retired. I'm not working anymore. I'm not doing any other sports. That's it. So, like, I'm not ready. I'm not on board with anyone, any, like, non-senior citizen playing golf.
For those of us that don't have generational arm talent like you and can just carve up the flag football field, I mean, you gotta have an outlet, right? You gotta take your anger out somehow. So, to each their own.
I'll say this. Here's what I'll say about golf. To actually play golf, you can't have a real job. Like, I just don't understand how anyone does that, because it's like really time consuming. But to watch golf is a different story, and it's a great sport to bet on. Because here's the thing, it happens, Thursday, Friday, you put it on the background. Saturday, nothing better than like third round of the Masters. And then Sunday, it's like the easiest lazy day, thing. So if you don't have a job like Seth's where you work 7 days a week, 20 hours a week. I mean, it's Seth and Sean McVay and then Elon Musk. Okay. Those are the hardest working people in the world. And so if you're not one of them, you can enjoy golf on Sunday.
That's the try.
I have a question for Brad. Just let's stay off topic here. Brad, Patrick Kane, he's not a Chicago Blackhawk anymore. How do you feel about that?
The only reason I'm not brokenhearted by it is I'm gonna go with some buddies in New York to go watch him play. Probably gonna wear a Blackhawks jersey. But it is tough. Well, I thought he was gonna be a lifelong Blackhawk. Also, congrats to Brian Leach, by the way, the second best American-born New York Ranger. Pretty cool distinction. Oh yeah, I said it.
I cannot believe that. Now, the golf talk was one thing. Bringing up hockey on this podcast, Seth. All right, let's get this back on the rails here. Where do we want to start? So we've got Rodgers, Carr, and Lamar Jackson. Let's start with Carr because we actually know what he's doing. Signing with the Saints. I guess we could loop in Daniel Jones here as well because he signed 4 years. I think it was 160 million. Brad. So I kind of want to start actually with you, Brad, the deals and kind of what they actually mean and represent. Were they kind of and give us a sense of, what they were for kind of the people who want to look past the headlines. Were they kind of good deals? Were they bad deals? What are you hearing from other people in the league about them? Like, what's the sentiment there?
Yeah, so if you did the classic, like, what is this actual contract for Carr? It's 2 years and realistically probably $70 million if they wanted to get out of it. For Daniel Jones, it's 2 years, about $94 million. If that was your worst case scenario, I think most likely you see a 3-year, $112.5 million, which would be $37.5 million per year commitment. And then both guys have a massive 4th-year salary. Carr's is $50 million. I'm blanking on Daniel Jones' exact number on the last year, but it's also exorbitant, and probably either those guys would get extended or cut, or something would happen there. So those are the actual numbers. Geno Smith also should throw him in, I guess, as well. I think that one may be worth a small discussion. $25 million per year is the actual value. 3 years, $75 million. It's the first like true mid-tier contract we've seen at quarterback in so long. And I think it gives them a massive edge, but I think it's also basically a 1.5-year deal. And if Seattle's at 5, I think they still could take quarterback and let that guy sit behind Geno for, maybe a year and a half, ideally 2 years, I guess, and see how that all plays out.
It's still the perfect Anthony Richardson spot. Like I still think, and it was interesting. He had that quote where he said he and Pete Carroll, like, didn't he say something like he and Pete Carroll hit it off or something like that? But to be just a reminder for everyone out there, find me the last time a running quarterback won a Super Bowl. Seth, let's talk about your Saints here for a second. That we by the way, for anyone that is curious why we're laughing, we had a long conversation about this very topic before the podcast started. And it is, in fact, I should be clear, the case that I am supportive of quarterbacks that are athletic and can run the football, because it is a huge advantage to your team. Derek Carr is not quite an Anthony Richardson, but he is definitely going to be starting for the Saints. Here's my question to you, Seth. Is this an upgrade? They've had Andy Dalton and Jameis Winston on their roster. Is there any reason to believe this is better for the Saints?
It's funny. It's the way that Andy Dalton played last year. It might not be an upgrade. He played pretty well. I know the offense is
graded higher than Carr,
much higher than Carr. I think obviously when you look at Dalton over the past, let's say 3 years, even maybe his last year in Cincinnati, it hasn't been as good as Carr has been over the same time frame. Like, Carr had some good years up until this year, basically. And that was a new system, and obviously he's going to be in another new system this year. So, maybe that's the reason for that. But, if Dalton played like he did again, then you're getting Dalton, and whatever the contract would be, certainly not the many, many millions of dollars that they're giving Derek Carr. So it's like, that not really an upgrade. Now, if Derek Carr comes back and plays like he has, 2019, 2020, 2021, pretty good years, then it's probably an upgrade. I don't think this makes them Super Bowl contenders, which I think they obviously think it does. And I think that's the frustrating part with this whole thing, where it's like, if they were out to go and get, Deshaun Watson last year, like, morality aside, like, that makes you a Super Bowl contender. If Lamar Jackson's available and there's no collusion, then you go get him. That makes you a Super Bowl contender. I don't think Carr makes you a Super Bowl contender. Now, with that said, you could probably make the argument that it's the best supporting cast that Carr has ever had. Certainly defensively, I would say. I mean, he's always played with like the 32nd ranked defense every year. So that receiver talent in terms of like the whole receiving core is probably the best. Now, obviously, there's no Devontae Adams. Probably no Devontae Adams caliber player there. But in terms of whole receiving core, probably whole offensive line as well. So there's stuff there. The division being weak means you probably get a home game in the playoffs, I would think. So like, there's a lot of good things there, but the Saints just keep going down this rabbit hole, and the team just keeps getting worse around the quarterback position, and the quarterback position keeps getting worse from Drew Brees. So like, this is the problem, is they keep kicking the can down the road, and people want to say like, oh, they keep manipulating the cap, but the roster is getting worse. So yeah, you're making, you have these built-in mechanisms for restructuring and stuff like that. All cool. Everyone loves Kai Hartley. It's amazing. Great. But like, at the same time, this roster is not better than it was in 2021 and 2022 and now 2023, with Cam Jordan a year older, Tyrann Mathieu a year older. You don't have Marcus Williams. You don't have Terron Armstead. You don't have all these players. You might not have Michael Thomas. I think there's a, when I spin it forward, Michael Thomas comes back, and then the receiving core is really good with Olave and and Rashid Shaheed. Trevor Penning becomes a first round pick type of player at tackle to come in and play there. But other than that, like Demario Davis is a year older. It doesn't feel good. And I'm going to get very long winded here. I apologize.
I
say this as a Saints.
It's shocking,
I say this as a Saints fan, where I'm okay with tanking now. And I only say that because my favorite hockey team is tanking right now. I mean, no one says they're tanking, but they're tanking. They had the number 1 overall pick last year. They're going to be in the mix, hopefully, for the number 1 overall pick this year. And I'm okay with it. Like, as a huge fan of the Montreal Canadiens, I'm okay with it. I watched the Saints starting in 2020 when Drew Brees' arm fell off, and you could tell week 3. And I wrote an article about it very early on. Sorry, 2021, I should say. I was like, this is not going to end well. And I'm looking at it like, man, by week 3, I'm like, this team's not going to win the Super Bowl. Like, you win a couple games, I get it, but this team is absolutely not going to win the Super Bowl. So that's frustrating. Like, I don't want to have apathy. The Canadians suck. They're very, very bad, but I'm excited about them because they're going to get they have another first round pick this year. They're going to get 2 first round picks. They got the number 1 overall pick last year. Like, I'm excited for them. But the Saints, it's like, they're not going to win the Super Bowl this year. Might as well just blow it up. Hope I'm wrong. Obviously, I hope I'm wrong. Hope Derek Carr is the best quarterback of all time. Hope they win a Super Bowl. It just doesn't feel like that, and that's why it's a little frustrating.
I just want to jump in real quick. A couple notes. I mean, first, I think like we hear a lot of, but the NFC South stinks. Like, that really shouldn't be driving your moves. Like, yeah, okay. So like you said, you can host a playoff game. Like, cool. You can go 9-8 and host a playoff game and get shellacked by the Dallas Cowboys like we just saw this past year. Second thing I just thought was funny, and you mentioned it. The Raiders, the last 4 years, their defense, their best performance in EPA per play allowed was 26th. And the Saints' worst defense was 10th. And yes, defense is volatile, but like it's astronomical how much better a defense Derek Carr has, which, maybe helps him make fewer unforced errors, stuff like that. But I just thought that stat was hilarious. I mean, literally bottom 5 every year versus top 10 every year.
Yeah, it's interesting looking at the odds, right? I want to say we talked about this on Sunday in our divisional bets, and one of them, actually we bet on a couple here that we're going to talk about. One of them was the Saints. I think, Brad, when we got it at plus 210, and it's now plus 140. I didn't actually look at like conference or kind of Super Bowl winner, but it would almost surprise me if like Super Bowl winner moved much at all. I mean, they're still 40-1 to win the Super Bowl. I don't remember what it was before that, but it's one of those ones where, Seth, like, it's going to help you hang a banner for a division, but I can't imagine that really helps you feel good about going to the Super Bowl. The only thing that is probably worth pointing out is the NFC sucks. I mean, the NFC is absolutely terrible. And the Saints are in a position where they could breeze to a divisional win, pun intended. And then they could be in a position where, with a couple injuries, like if the Eagles get hurt, something happens to the Eagles, Niners quarterback doesn't, pan out. Who knows, So I think it's that false, and that's not the way that I would suggest that people run their team, but I could see that, Seth, in terms of a, kind of false sense of things. I mentioned Geno here briefly. Let's talk about the Seahawks a little bit. They're still plus 550 to win the NFC West. I'll start with you, Brad, because we liked the Seahawks position here. Does this strengthen? I mean, is this at all unexpected to you? Does this strengthen your kind of belief in betting the Seahawks as a bit of a long shot?
It does. It really does. So I mentioned before, there is the biggest issue, and we talked about it with Daniel Jones a little bit, where like the mid-tier market just doesn't really exist. And yes, Daniel Jones isn't getting $50 million a year, but a player of his caliber getting $40 million a year is basically borderline top of market. Yeah, Seth is shaking his head at that number, which is understandable. I don't totally get it myself. I thought they would go franchise tag him, let it play out, let him do it again, and maybe see where things end up. But yes, for Seattle to only pay $25 million a year, and the full deal is not out yet, but that is the base value. There are some incentives, whatever. They can spend pretty aggressively. They're top 10 in salary cap space still after this move, and you have all these great rookie contract players, both tackles, a couple starting corners. Like they really can, if they want to, go after maybe one of the marquee defensive linemen, or try to bolster the interior of their offensive line, or do some things that if you get 2022 Geno again, and I know he fizzled out a little bit at the end of the year, but I thought he had the best performance against the Niners of anyone in the playoffs by like a decent margin. If you get that guy again, they could be. I love that divisional bet. I'm not sure. I guess it was 550 already because people assumed Geno was going to be back, but I'm surprised it's not even just like 5-1 at this point.
Did they assume he'd be back at that discount though?
Right, probably not. Probably not.
I mean, and this is how we get into the rookie quarterbacks here a little bit, Seth. But we talked about this again on Sunday. How many teams should be in it for a quarterback? I don't think the Saints are in it for a quarterback now. Maybe they still should be. I still can't believe they gave up on Jameis, but I don't think this precludes the Seahawks from being in on quarterback. And I don't think it should. And I think that gives you more outs potentially. I'd be curious, Seth, like, do you think, say Anthony Richardson is there, is he a guy that you would take at 5? Is it worth it? Or would you say, let me either trade back, maybe there's a team that wants to get up there, or let me pick, a great defensive player, whatever it is, and try and win with Geno?
I'm in the camp that I think you should bolster your roster and roll with Geno. I think I probably would say this even.
So roll with Geno. Let me just be clear. You're rolling with Geno, but not Carr.
Oh, 100%. And don't ask me why. Don't ask me why. No, honestly, the why is
I'm with you. I'm just like,
I think that Geno gives you more upside, I think, in terms of big play capability down the field. Now we'll see, like, Carr has changed his stripes a little bit. He's not the same quarterback he was kind of growing up in the league. But Geno came in and was just throwing dimes down the field all day, and can hit all parts of the field. Loves work in the middle of the field, deep, intermediate level stuff like that. So I think he's great movement in the pocket. Carr doesn't really have that as well. So yeah, 100%. This is a great deal for them. So I could probably
real quick on the Carr. Sorry, I had to interject because I just thought of this. On the Carr point, the average depth of target from Carr to Michael Thomas is going to be like 2 yards. It's going to be beautiful. Michael Thomas is going to have, like, if he can stay healthy, like 300 receptions for 1,000 yards. It's going to be great.
Yeah. My thing with the Seahawks is Pete Carroll being 71 or 72, whatever he is. And I do think that it probably does play a factor in what they think of the future there in Seattle. And if he obviously has a voice in the room, man, if you're that old and you're not thinking about, well, let's go get Anthony Richardson and we'll tutor him and we'll figure it out in 3 years or whatever. You're thinking, man, I'm close now. I got a solid quarterback. Defense sucked last year. I can make it better with whatever, Jalen Carter, Will Anderson. Like, we'll see how the cookie crumbles. And obviously you have the pick at 20 as well. So that is where I'm like, I think they should go. And also, like, at the end of the day, Geno. First of all, I believe this is repeatable by Geno, and B, being that he's 32. He's not an athletic quarterback. He's a pocket passer. So he could age into 36, 37 at this level. So I don't think you're worried about age with that. So I don't know. I'm pro Geno. I'm Geno pilled, and I want to see them bolster their defense and make a run with Geno.
The Pete Carroll thing is worth mentioning. It's kind of related. I don't know if I said this. No, I didn't say, because I heard it in Indy, but like, someone just mentioned, hey, like, Stephen Ross, the Dolphins owner, is 82 years old. And, like, that matters a lot. Like, Pete Carroll, like, Bill Belichick has been pretty aggressive in free agency after not doing that for 20 years in a row. He now spends a bunch because he wants to win. Like, Pete Carroll went, all right, we have 2 top 20 picks. We have a bunch of cap space. Let's go nuclear. Like, let's try to do this thing right now. And they honestly, they could. So I think it is a relevant point for sure. Just because Carroll, how much longer? I mean, I know he has the energy of a 20-year-old saying he's talking shit to Sauce Gardner on Twitter these days, but they're in a good spot.
It's a good point. I'm very confident, in fact, that they're not going to draft a quarterback, but it's interesting that it does leave the door open. I think the reason that they won't, and maybe they end up not trading out of this, but it's interesting. You look at the recent mock draft that Renner and Mike Renner and Sam Monson put out, and they've got Anthony Richardson going in the top 5. And it seems like, his stock is skyrocketed. I think he's, plus 275 and be number 1 overall pick at this point. Where are you at on Anthony Richardson, Seth? And is he a guy that is he ahead of a CJ Stroud? Is he ahead of a Bryce Young, or is he ahead of Will Levis? Like, where do you see him here? How much is the fact that he's a super freaky athlete? We knew that probably already, like, if you watch his tape, but where do you have him?
Yeah, I think he's probably in the tier with Levis. Like, I probably have 2 tiers, and they're very close. I think I would go Stroud and Young as tier 1,
In that order.
and then Richardson and Levis in tier 2. I think I'll interject here with my pet peeve of the week while we're talking about Anthony Richardson, which is the pushback that you generally see on Twitter. I'm sure it happened on the networks, debate shows as well, about, okay, he ran this incredible 40 and he jumped high and he did all that stuff, and then the pushback is always, well, he's a quarterback, so can he throw the ball to the right receiver accurately? And it's like, well, buddy, the combine is not 11 on 11. It's not pass shell. It's literally, can you run fast? And he ran as fast as any quarterback in terms of, like, athletic score. He was basically the best we've ever seen. That's fun. That's cool. That's it. We don't have to talk about his quarterback stuff, because that's not what the combine is. You want to go watch the CFL combine where they do fucking day 1 install and they fucking do up 12 on 12. Like, then yes, that's a different story. The NFL combine,
they should do that.
Just athletic testing.
It's cool to enjoy things. It's okay to enjoy things, right?
But
yeah, that's it.
So, and 100% on board with this. What I think is interesting and what it highlights is how few people have watched any of these quarterbacks play. This is where I'm going to make my pitch to go to pff.com, get the draft guide. I mean, you're going to get the culmination of having watched every single play throughout his college career is there in the PFF draft guide. You can get it for 20% off, promo code forecast, I might add. So head over to pff.com right now. You also get Brad's salary cap projections that are not just the best in the business, but the best by a mile. So everything that you need for the offseason there. But when you do think about Anthony Richardson, like, where does the kind of whole package lie for you there? Because you have him in the same tier as Levis. Levis is not the same athlete that he is. But from a passing perspective, taking that into account, like, how do you think about him?
I think they both throw the ball really well. I'll give them both credit for that. Levis, to me, is like the guy that I watch to kind of, when I coach quarterbacks, I kind of take Levis as he's kind of like the platonic ideal these days of throwing motion, which is always going to skew my view as someone who tries to teach that to other people. Like, so take understand what I'm saying here. But Richardson, man, I remember I watched him. They went and beat Utah week 1, and there was so much to like. And I think the best comparison is like probably Malik Willis, who didn't run, but didn't post any numbers. He didn't run at the combine or pro day or anything like that, but was clearly an immense athlete, but like honestly just didn't know what he was doing. I think Richardson knows what he's doing. He's kind of he's closer to Lamar in that sense, where a lot of people thought, well, Lamar was just this runner, that's why we got to move him to receiver. And he's like, and Lamar was always this guy who understood everything about playing the quarterback position. Richardson is probably closer to that than a Malik Willis. So that's why he'll go in the top 10, top 15, I'd say probably for sure. Whereas Malik Willis goes in, round 3 or whatever, plus the Florida pedigree, playing the SEC, yada, yada, yada. So I've liked a lot. I think he really tries to be a quarterback. Obviously, there's accuracy issues. Obviously, there might be some decision-making issues. You're hopeful that he just sticks around long enough to iron them out, and then he'll be ready year 3 or 4 or year 2 or whatever it is, and they go and get a receiver. Whichever team he goes on, they go and find a receiver. I mean, look, most quarterbacks don't hit. We know that. But you want to put him on the Josh Allen plan, which is like, he's super athletic. It might not be there year 1 and 2, but he gets reps. and he's allowed to continue to get reps because he can make plays athletically. And then you go find him a receiver like Stephon Diggs, right? And then everything explodes. Whereas
I thought you were going to say
another high pick,
Taysom Hill plan. That's
the Taysom Hill plan.
Yeah.
Whereas, Josh Rosen is a good example, the opposite, where it's like, okay, you put him in there, he's bad. He's bad just like Josh Allen was bad. But guess what? He can't escape. He can't do anything. He's getting killed back there. You just can't put him out there and let him learn and grow, because he might not stay alive, right? So like, this is where the athleticism stuff plays in. Look, if you could go and find the guy who's a genius right off the bat, like, yeah, great, but like, those guys don't exist. Maybe it's Bryce Young, I don't know. But so yeah, I think that's probably your plan for Anthony Richardson going forward. And I hope it's not the Seahawks, because I want to see Geno go all in.
Never forget Josh Rosen. If he didn't play tennis, would have been great. But like tennis too much. So
it's a red flag. It's a red flag. I would just say the one stat that just reflects what you just talked about, Seth, where the divergence between a Willis and a Richardson. Anthony Richardson was bottom 10 in college this year in pressure to sack rate. I mean, like, I think Willis is a historically bad, letting pressure turn, and that's a massive, massive, edge. You start there, you build out the accuracy, and then you could have a dude.
Yeah, and you saw that, by the way, in the NFL. That translates, right? So we talk about this a lot in terms of pressure rate, and often, and this is one of the things that Eric studied very early on, was the kind of assumption that the offensive line was always to blame for pressures and sacks and all those things. And time to throw is a quarterback stat. It is very sticky from quarterback to quarterback, from season to season, and from college to pro. And these are things that have remained the case. Now, Josh Allen has remained that way, but to your point, has a pretty low pressure to sack ratio because he's escaping, he's running with the football. Patrick Mahomes also holds onto the ball a little bit longer than most and has the lowest pressure to sack ratio, I think, over the past 5 years. It's him and Tom Brady, whatever it might be. So that is something that would give me a lot of confidence. And you saw it translate with Malik Willis. I mean, that was a disaster. Now, he had a horrible supporting cast. All those things are true. But it was tough to watch, really tough to watch. I think it'll be very interesting to see if a team is enamored enough to trade up. I think there are a lot of, the Panthers are there, the Falcons, and we'll talk about, I think it's a good transition with Lamar here, but it'd be very interesting to see what happens. Let's go to Lamar. So, Brad, can you set this up? What happened? Are there things that maybe weren't reported or that are nuanced that need to be cleared up here? And kind of where do we stand right now?
Yeah, so I'll try to avoid using the C word, but I think to a degree it's hard not to be frank. And that would be the collusion word, not any other C words that may have entered your brain when I said that.
I was legitimately like, what? What C word are we talking about?
That's so fair. That was a tough, cold intro.
Yeah.
Anyway, so look, essentially, Lamar Jackson gets a non-exclusive
International Women's Day.
Yes, dude. Yeah, of all days to be dropping C-bombs. Well, anyway, collusion was the word I meant. The word that I don't want to say that I've now said 3 times. Look, he gets a non-exclusive franchise tag for $32.5 million, which does enable another team to sign him to an offer sheet. And if Baltimore does not match that offer sheet, then they would get 2 first-round picks, which I think we all agree is drastically lower than what he would garner in a trade regardless. So here's the thing. I will say this. Look, yeah, he's missed about 10 games the last 2 years, and you could probably say, you know what, the way he plays the game. Look, I also think he's a guy that avoids hits a decent amount, but yeah, he's going to get hit a good amount when he runs, sure. So you can make that argument. You could also say, look, no one really wants to give the fully guaranteed contract that he's apparently looking for, which, by the way, we shouldn't actually know he's looking for that because, why would Baltimore be telling other teams in theory? But anyways, so all those things are legitimate. The thing that was bizarre to me is within an hour after the franchise tag was placed on Lamar Jackson, we had a half dozen teams and multiple, I won't name who, the reporter that said it was their team-owned or team-sponsored media reporter saying X team is not going to pursue Lamar Jackson. Here's the thing. Go meet with them. Go hear him out. If you don't like what he has to say, then move on. But to come out and say that when you, again, in theory, for all you know, he asked the Baltimore Ravens for $1. You shouldn't actually know that. So Yeah, like I said, I'm not trying to be a conspiracy theorist. I'm not trying to say there aren't also legitimate concerns. I think it's fair for teams that do have quarterbacks. Look, Matt Ryan was an Indianapolis Colt last year because the Falcons flirted with Deshaun Watson, and Matt Ryan said, "Get me on the next thing smoking out of here. I'm done." So I get all those arguments, but it was very, very strange how it played out. A guy of his caliber is absolutely worth 2 first-round picks and whatever contract you would give him. And I'll say this too. Yes, the fully guaranteed contract is a huge part of it. Not having an agent, and I know this sucks as an argument or rationale why. If he was repped by one of the power brokers of the NFL, again, maybe he doesn't sign an offer sheet. Those teams are not putting out reports half an hour after the tag saying we're not going to talk to him because they would risk fracturing a relationship that matters a lot and someone they deal with on a regular basis. So, it stinks a little bit to me. I'll tell you, it stinks. At this point, I don't really know what's going to happen. Maybe these teams are lying, and not every look. The Jets didn't say anything. The Patriots didn't say anything. The Commanders didn't say. Like, you could find some teams that maybe get into the mix there. But I mean, you mentioned Atlanta. Atlanta came out immediately, and that was one of the teams that it didn't come from Schefter. It came from AtlantaFalcons.com. I guess now I am naming names. Like, that's bizarre. Like with all due respect, that's bizarre. So anyway. That's where we're at.
This is because I think people get a little bit carried away with the, you should have an agent kind of thing, like do what you want to do sort of situation. But I mean, I sent this to you, Brad, like this is the first time where I've been like, man, he could really benefit, like him personally could really benefit from having an agent. Like, this is a sticky situation. The thing that you just mentioned, heck, now the negotiation component, and like, how are you going to do that? And the point that I would make, I think people always get kind of angry about this because it's like, traditionally, the agent is, taking something from the player, and it's like they're not doing that much. The player's playing. There is a skill to this, and Lamar Jackson's skill is not being an agent in the same way that an agent's skill is not being Lamar Jackson. And Lamar Jackson should continue to focus on being great at what he does. That's why you have managers. That's why you have PR people. That's why all these different things is so that you can be great at being a quarterback and not worrying about the other crap. And it would be a real shame if he doesn't get a chance to do that to the degree that he should because of this. And this is going to take a heck of a lot of time and attention to get this crap figured out. But Seth, I want to get to you in a second. Like, just real quick, Brad, what do you think the end of this is? Because the Ravens are plus 250 to win the AFC North. The Bengals are plus 130. The Browns are plus 370, and the Steelers are plus 550. If they thought that Lamar Jackson was gone, if the markets did, I've got to think that that's a little bit longer. So what do you think happens?
Yeah, so one point I want to clarify, because I dug into CBA, I actually finally got this answer from a team staffer, was you can sign Lamar Jackson to an offer sheet after the draft. So one team that everyone brings up is the Miami Dolphins. He's from South Florida. He apparently, would be interested in going there. They don't have a first-round pick, right? So a lot of people thought, are they out of the running here? I was able to get confirmation from a club source. They couldn't do it until after the draft. But then, which there's obviously still a lot of time between the draft and week 1 of the season, they then could sign him to an offer sheet and get in the mix there. But my best guess, honestly, is that he plays next year on the franchise tag and goes the Kirk Cousins route. So, hey, how does it impact an AFC North bet? I'm a little wary of betting on a guy. It's tough. Like, I don't blame him if he wants to protect himself. I do not think he intentionally sat out this year. I think it's kind of ridiculous, but like, yeah, it scares you a little bit. But anyway, long answer short, my bet is he just plays next year on the tag and we go from there.
Brad, what is the future in regards to these fully guaranteed deals? Like, this seems like it's inevitable anyways, and we already have one. So what's going on?
So the one thing there is, and again, morality and stuff aside, and I hate saying that. I know we all hate saying that, but like, Deshaun Watson was in such a unique situation where he was effectively a free agent that was a 26-year-old in the prime of his career, top 10 quarterback, right? And so the reason why I keep telling people like it's not a precedent, it's not going to happen again, is because of franchise tags, right? Like, if Joe Burrow or Justin Herbert tries to do this and they say, I'm only taking this and nothing else, those teams are going to franchise tag them as well. I mean, those two guys, think about it, that would be 3 more years of control if they went, or 4 more, 5th year option, franchise tag. So I hear you. We had the Kirk Cousins 3 years. We had the Deshaun Watson 5 years, but the league clearly does not want that to become a precedent in any way, shape, or form. And it's tough. It's going to take, certain teams may be willing to do it. But yeah, at the end of the day, that's kind of what the franchise tag is there to prevent. And we're seeing that play out right now.
Do you think, is your knowledge around, because I think the NFL owners are a unique group, right? This is not the NBA ownership by any stretch of the imagination. If baseball mattered anymore, maybe we could compare it to that, but no one gives a crap. This would be the ownership group where you'd be like, okay, is there some, did someone pick up the phone and say, hey, look, here's what's going to happen? Is Bisciotti the type of guy who has that sort of authority? Like, is he respected in that way? Or is this something that the owners are so unified about that it doesn't really matter? And they're just like, screw this. We don't want to set this precedent. Everyone hates what the Browns did. And no one's a big Jimmy Haslam fan. Like, is that
so I will say this. So yes, it's a united front. I'm sure 31 other teams at the next owners meeting, no one sat next to Jimmy Haslam. I'm sure that was the case, but I also will say this. Look, I'm not trying to make excuses or pocket watch for billionaires, but I will say, like, the thing that comes into it here is the escrow rule, and not to get fully deep into the weeds, but you have to put fully guaranteed money in future years aside in an escrow account. Some owners I legitimately think cannot do that. Like, I don't think the Raiders, the Chargers, the Bengals, the Bears, like, the family-owned teams, I genuinely agree with them that yes, they're rich because they have an asset, they have equity.
Mm-hmm,
they do not have liquid cash to go do that. Obviously, some owners do. But at the end of the day, it's just they don't want this to become a precedent, which stinks. You mentioned their leagues. Baseball, basketball, those deals are fully guaranteed. These are quarterbacks where, it's the most important position in all of sports, arguably. But again, I'm not trying to say collusion again, but it's just like, it doesn't benefit them. And so do I think Bisciotti's calling around saying, hey, don't offer him a deal? No, I don't think so. But I think there's enough pressure to not do it. That it just kind of, maybe they knew they weren't going to have as much competition in this market as, people like myself. I was like shocked this happened. And maybe I kind of misread that aspect of it.
Seth, what's the ideal place for him? I mean, maybe we assume that the places that have come out on their website and said they're not going to go after him, which is just absolutely bananas and another ridiculous move by Arthur Blank. But of the teams where we think it's a possibility, Ravens included, what's the ideal place?
I mean, it has to be the Dolphins. We've said it the whole year. I mean, like, I know a lot of people really fell in love with Tua this season, did have a good year, but I think it's not a choice really between Tua and Lamar. So, and you have the receivers in place, you have the offensive coordinator in place. We know what he can do, scheming up, running the football with the RPOs, and then the arm talent to pair with Tyreek Hill, and obviously, and Jalen Waddle, and obviously, like, in terms of just pure arm strength, he has just as much as Mahomes does. Like, they both throw the ball really, really far, a lot farther than Tua does. So we've seen what Tyreek can do with that, and he's already great last year with Tua. So we've seen that it should be. That's a no-brainer to me. Obviously, again, like, if this actually happens, if he does move, then it's the Dolphins for sure.
And that, I mean, it's interesting because I think those pieces make sense. Mike McDaniel coming from San Francisco, where it's interesting, the quarterbacks that we've seen have success in San Francisco have not been mobile. We saw it. The only example of that was Trey Lance, and that was a nightmare. Obviously, I'm not making the comparison to the two.
Yeah.
What I'm asking about is, how do you think McDaniel changes, right? We've seen Lamar run a very specific type of system. What does that look like? Is it a hybrid? Is it McDaniel then putting in a whole bunch of new stuff? What does that look like?
Well, I think this is why it makes sense, is because of Trey Lance. And again, not talking about the individual talent of the two quarterbacks, but talking about it felt like very clearly Shanahan and his people there, and Mike McDaniel was there at the time, they were ready to go with an option offense, right? And like, you even think about, this is maybe too much of an aside, but the Rams had this kind of weird opportunity with John Wolford a couple of years ago, and he's a running quarterback, and I think it was salivating for McVay to go and get into this type of offense. And you saw it right away with the 49ers when Trey Lance played 2 years ago now, in his first season, they went automatically into pistol and gave us all the option stuff. Well, that's what the Ravens have done for 4 years now. So I think it fits perfectly with what Mike McDaniel probably would love to be able to scheme up. You can't talk to an offensive coordinator. Here's the thing about drawing up plays. They all work better when the quarterback can run the football. Every run play looks a lot better when the quarterback can run the football. So I'd be 100% thinking he would love to have that type of player, and the offense would still work at the level that I think we come to expect from this tree.
So could that be a sign and trade then? Right. So like, I think if they sign him to an offer sheet and Baltimore doesn't match, then they get the next 2 first-round picks that are originally the team's picks, right?
Correct.
So their next 2 original picks, and those would be the following 2 years, I think, for Miami. They don't have their pick this year. Would this be a situation where it would behoove Baltimore to try and get a sign and trade done so they could get Tua? Or are they just looking for those first 2 picks? Like, is there a way that this works differently than maybe just the offer sheet?
Yeah, so shout out Jason Fitzgerald at overthecap.com, who provides all of our contract and everything, all that data. He put out today, you can't do that. You get, this is the constraints of what happens here. If they went the exclusive route, which is why I thought they would do that, then you can negotiate for whatever you want. You could have gotten, 3 first-round picks, 2 Tagovailoa, and whatever. On this, the setup is you sign the offer sheet, you get the 2 first-round picks. You can't add additional consideration and do other things to kind of manipulate the constraints of what we have here.
Okay, but you could match. So the only option is to match the offer.
Correct.
Okay, very interesting. Let's get to the last quarterback in this wonderful offseason of quarterback moves, and that is Aaron Rodgers. It seems as though there's a lot of steam behind the Jets. The Jets brass took a flight from New York to Los Angeles and met with Rodgers in Southern California because he's out of the darkness and into the light now, which he's probably doing some sort of meditation in the foothills with the Kardashians, because I think that's the in thing. Brad, I mean, is there anything else at play here besides the Packers or the Jets? And is retirement still an option? Does that seem like that's off the table? What's kind of the latest there?
So I think it should not be understood. It's a massive deal. Whenever a team lets a player under contract with them talk directly to another club, like you look the last couple of years, a trade happens pretty shortly thereafter. That is a very big signal. I think it is at this point the Jets, or he comes back to Green Bay and Green Bay either tries to pressure him into retiring or whatever the case may be there. But I think the Jets at this point are going to do whatever it takes to get it done. Also, have to shout out, I was in the Jets building today. Thank you to the Jets organization for having me. It was awesome. So I did some media stuff there that's coming out later, but we'll obviously talk about Aaron Rodgers. Had to give him a shout out. But anyway, I think they're the team that is willing to go there, pay the price, but from a trade standpoint, and obviously pay his $60 million owed next year. There was also a quote that came out that basically was like, the Packers are not even trying to, bend them over a barrel. They honestly just want to get some draft picks because they want to start the Jordan Love era and just move on. I think it comes down to him saying yes, but I think he could be the Jets quarterback, before the league year begins on March 15th.
So the Jets are plus 275 right now to win the AFC East. Seth, can I interest you in Aaron Rodgers leading the Jets to an AFC East championship?
100%. I mean, look, I don't think it's the same. This year was not MVP level. We can all agree with that. I think there was a lot of plays that Rodgers had made outside the pocket that weren't being made anymore. It concerns me. I wrote the article at the beginning of the season saying him and Brady don't look up for it this season. We saw what happened. I guess the Bucs made the playoffs, but that doesn't really count. But bad seasons by both of them. Brady retires. I brought it up before. I wrote the article about Drew Brees 2021 season, week 3. Saints fan killed me. He couldn't play that year. It's not quite the same because Rodgers still has the arm, but it's not quite the Aaron Rodgers. That's what would scare me a bit. That it's like, and once this drop happens, it's over, right? It's over. We saw it with Breeze. We saw it with Brady. You know, the injuries with Peyton Manning. We saw it with Roethlisberger. You cannot play anymore. With all that said, man, it's Aaron Rodgers. Like, how can you not at least try it if you're the Jets to go get a Hall of Fame quarterback? You know, obviously they tried it with Brett Favre, but the Vikings also tried it with Brett Favre, and it worked for them, right? Yeah. So there is precedent, obviously, with Peyton Manning and the Broncos, et cetera, et cetera. There's precedent here. I know it looked bad last year. If you're betting, it's probably like 50-50 that it looks bad again. However, it's a good roster. We know the defense played well. There's some young receivers that they'll like. Some young offensive linemen that could grow into being pretty good players. That's going to be probably the most important part. It's still Aaron Rodgers, so I still think that's probably you got to go and pull the trigger there.
Quick follow-up question for you. So, well, first, I do think the injuries there maybe played a role, like, you know, the thumb, the back, all sorts of stuff. But quick follow-up. You can honestly give like a yes or no. Like, is it that big of a deal? Not even the connection and relationship to Nathaniel Hackett, but just like, you know, the Raiders were initially floated. Is the verbiage and language thing, like, is it that big of a deal where, like, you would think Rodgers would not want to have to learn a new dialect? Like, is that big of a deal, or is that overblown, you think?
I think it is a big deal, but you can obviously work around it, because from what I understand, and again, like, I'm using this one example and I'm going to tell the whole story here, so I don't know whether I should do that or not, but from what I've
understood, yes or no answer. So tell the whole story, please.
The Peyton Manning Broncos year one, he goes in, Adam Gase is the OC, and Gase wants to put in his verbiage, and basically like 3 weeks in, they're like, nah, we're not doing this anymore. So I think there's ways around it, but so it is a big deal. Clearly, you want to stay with the same language that you've been using for a long time. These are very complicated systems. Like, it takes a lot of memorization to figure it out, and maybe you don't have that in one off season. So I think it is an important thing here. So yeah, I agree. It's an important thing, but again, you could just use, like, you use the quarterback's verbiage and you make
right
else learn it, because the thing is, like, he's the one giving the play call in the huddle. He's got to know it more. You're just getting, I mean, I know play calls we talked about this for hours, but like in the NFL, most play calls, like every bit of the play call, everyone's assignment is verbalized in the huddle to a certain degree. It's not like college where it's the opposite. So the quarterback's telling everyone what to do. He's got to know what's up, and the other guy's got to follow. So I think it's a big deal, but work around.
It'd be fascinating. By the way, that's how we knew Adam Gase was worthy of head coaching gig. So, you know, play close attention this time around. I mean, the AFC East, we just talked about Lamar going to the Dolphins. Dolphins plus 370, or sorry, no, more. Plus 425 right now on DraftKings. Jets plus 275. You know, clearly there's a higher chance of Rodgers making it to the Jets, but I am still interested in the Dolphins there. You know, maybe a longer shot, but the Bills, what's clear here, Seth and Brad, is the Bills are just Bijan Robinson away from a Super Bowl. Okay. Bills should be worried about their division next year. Okay. They're right now they're plus 100 to win this division. There are only, I want to say, two teams, the Chiefs and the Niners, who have shorter odds. They're both minus money favorites. The Bills need to do some things to improve their team offensively.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Like,
yeah, it's all of a sudden, like, if you looked at this a year ago today, and then today, even though it's like a lot of the same players, you're like, oh, our ideas around these players are drastically different. All of a sudden, we're like, oh, this is not a great roster outside of like 4 elite players. You know,
it's not. Yeah, no, it's not.
It's very interesting stuff. Last thing here, you mentioned it, Brad, kind of got swept under the rug, but I heard it today when I talked to Mike Renner as well. Because I showed him a mock draft of the Packers picking CJ Stroud after trading Aaron Rodgers. And he responded, he goes, they're all in on Jordan Love. 8 plays. They saw it. Saw all they needed to see. It's Jordan Love season. Seth, are you all in on Jordan Love?
No, because I wasn't all in as a when I scouted him coming out of Utah State. So like I didn't think he was a first round pick then. I know it was like late in the first round, so that's kind of like for quarterbacks, that's kind of a second round pick almost. But like
Basically like a 7th round pick.
yeah, exactly. So no, like yeah, okay, you played again. It's like great. You looked okay in like a few plays this year, but I got into so much trouble, not actual trouble, but like for myself when writing the PFF College Football Preview magazine, where I would look at these like 18-year-old kids who were in the same boat, who were about to take over, who had 30 throws in a whole season, and they're like 19, 18 years old. They were freshmen. They're going to be the starter as sophomores. And I was like, oh, those are the greatest 25 throws ever. And now I'm writing it down. He's amazing. He's going to be a star. He's going to win the Heisman. And I'm ready not to do that anymore. So I'm pausing. I'm pumping the brakes a bit on Jordan Love.
I agree with Mike though. That's every indication I've gotten. They're not trying to get a quarterback with the pick they get. They're trying to build around a guy they believe in, which is interesting. But that's what I've heard too.
It's the Packer way.
It is, and it's worked for my entire lifetime as a Bears fan. So who am I to make fun of it?
It's interesting though. I mean, it's relevant for draft props certainly.
Yeah,
That'd be an interesting thing to talk about. Seth, it's always a pleasure. Rested and refreshed Seth is my favorite version of Seth. So glad that you got a little time off last week. Participated, I heard, in as much athletic events as most of the players at the combine. And it definitely shows. So thank you for coming on. Follow Seth, PFF_Seth on Twitter. Some of the best content that you can find on that godforsaken website. We always appreciate it, buddy. Thanks for hanging out.
See you guys.
Beauty of remote work. But I feel you. I was thinking about getting a haircut. I got it pretty short last time. I think I'm gonna let it rock here. I gotta match the beard a little bit.
Yep.
Keeping it going. Arjun, we are prepared for not just draft bets, but rumor has it that Brad is gonna bring the heat from a golf betting perspective today. So it's gonna be a good one. Let's start with some draft props, and it looks like we have got team to select players in the FanDuel sportsbook. I don't see these on DraftKings. Not sure where else you might be able to get them, but the likes of first tight end drafted, team to draft, Quentin Johnson, Jamar Gibbs, Jackson Smith, and Jigba, Anthony Richardson. These are interesting. It adds a new lens. Arjun, where do you want to start here?
Yeah, so I definitely want to talk about the player team props. Have been talking about it in the Discord. If we've gotten some decent value, I think we should start with Smith and the Jigba. I think that definitely is the market. I think it has a lot of value. Two of the bets I have kind of liked is the Texans at 7-1 and the Patriots at 9-1. Now, I like them for a couple of reasons. Like Patriots, I think Jacoby Myers leaves, so they need a new slot guy. JSN would be a great, person for them to draft at 14. And from the last time we talked, where Najigba was the second, he had the second shortest odds to be first receiver taken. Now he's number one, and he's like minus odds on some books. So I think instead of going in the 20s, he'll go in the upper teens. So I'm thinking like 12 to 15 range. And so the Texans and the Patriots both stick out to me. Both teams prioritize the 3-cone drill and short shuttle when it comes to what they look for in scouting receivers. I know Bill Belichick, his kind of thing is like he likes to draft or trade for players who don't separate. Think N'Keal Harry or like Devontae Parker. But when it comes to, I think, some parts of the draft, Smith and Jigba also resembles Julian Edelman pretty similarly. And something I saw was, so JSN's 3-cone time was 6.57 seconds. Edelman was 6.62. JSN's short shuttle was 3.93 and Edelman's was 3.92. So a lot of similarities there between the two players. And I think both GMs who come from the New England lineage, I think could see JSN go. So I like the Texans and Patriots at 7-1 and 9-1.
You mentioned the recent the recent Bill Belichick maneuvers. He does famously in the past said he thought Jonathan Baldwin and Julio Jones were basically the same prospect because he actually cared a ton about separation. That's like all he cared about. So went for some big bodied guys, but I think that is his bread and butter historically. Obviously, that particular take didn't pan out super well, but I like that thought process a lot.
His bread and butter is just drafting terrible wide receivers.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
That's what it is. Let's be clear. So the market here, the Bears are your Bears, Brad, are plus 650. The Ravens 7-1, along with the Texans, the Patriots, and your Chargers, who you failed to mention, Arjun. I'm not sure if you're manifesting or what's going on there. 9-1. The New York Daniel Jones Giants and the Dallas Cowboys are 10-1. Green Bay Packers are 11-1. The Vikings 16-1, and then the Seahawks, Chiefs, and Panthers are 20-1. Any other markets or any other teams here that you like, Brad?
Minnesota might be too far down. That would be more if he slides a little bit, and I trust Arjun thinking he's going to go, definitely in the teens, maybe early teens, but it's starting to look like Adam Thielen's not going to be back in Minnesota. They have KJ Osborne, who's a solid number 3. But hey, if you want to, add someone opposite Justin Jefferson, if he's there still, I think they would probably pull the trigger there.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, I'm this way. I look at every team and go, you could probably use another receiver. So, it wouldn't surprise me for a lot of teams to do it. The Cowboys and it would just be hilarious if the Packers drafted a receiver in the first round after letting Rodgers go. But the Cowboys are an interesting one to me, as are the Giants. But I really like the way you're thinking about it. Arjun and I haven't done anywhere near that level of analysis. So I think those two make a ton of sense. If you're looking a little further down, I could see those teams. But is it is this also predicated, Arjun, on you thinking JSN is the number 1 receiver off the board, or is this kind of agnostic of that?
Yeah, it definitely is based on he's the number 1 receiver. Again, me and Brad, like both of our predictions were that Jacoby Myers was going to leave New England. And I'm like, New England's probably going to be the first team that takes a receiver. I could see Houston doing it, but I think it's most likely going to be New England. And in this case, it would be JSN. And again, like from Sunday to now, JSN has moved to be the betting odds-on favorite, -105, -110 on some books. So with that in mind, I think, projecting him in the high teens to some of these teams like the Patriots and Texans is kind of how I thought about it.
Yeah, it makes sense. He's -110 to be the first wide receiver selected. Quentin Johnson +225, Jordan Addison 550, Zay Flowers 600 on DraftKings. All right, next one. Where do you want to go next?
I think we should just go to Quentin Johnson, stay on the receiver trail. It's weird because, the Texans are the overall favorite. They're 6-1. The Chargers are at +750, which, as a Chargers fan, I don't really understand. Quentin Johnson's just a faster Mike Williams. And the thing that I wouldn't put money on the Chargers taking a receiver in the first round for a couple of reasons. Tom Telesco just in general doesn't really invest in the receiver position. At Indianapolis, he said he wants Keenan Allen to be Andre Smith, Charlie Joyner. He's going to be a Charger for a long time. And as someone who has thought Chargers could move on from him, it doesn't seem likely. And they seem very intent into going into 2023 with Keenan, Mike, and Josh Palmer as their 3 receivers. So I don't think Chargers should be the second favorites to draft Quentin Johnston. From this pick, I really like the Ravens at 9-1 for a couple of reasons. You look at the Ravens and who they've drafted at receiver in the past couple of years: Devin Duvernay, Rashad Bateman, Marquise Brown. Brown never tested in 2019, but Bateman and Duvernay both ran 4.43 and 4.39 in the 40-yard dash, both of which are like elite times for the receiver position. In addition, their 20-yard splits were also really good at 2.56 seconds and 2.58 seconds. Now, Johnston, for whatever reason, didn't test at the combine. I'm sure he's going to test at his pro day. But given all the reports, given everything people have said, like what Mike Renner said in his draft guide, Johnson's going to be flying in the 40s. And so I think for a team like the Ravens, who value the 40-yard dash and who have shown a tendency to kind of value that trait more, which is something that translates well to NFL success, I think Johnson would be a player that could be polarizing to some teams because of how he plays, but because of his athletic measurables, kind of the skill set he brings, and something that the Ravens don't have. I think the Ravens at 9-1 would be a bet that I would put on Quentin Johnston's first, or whoever drafts him.
Texans 6-1, Chargers +750, Patriots 850, Packers and Ravens, as you mentioned, 9-1, Jets 11, Giants 15, as are the Seahawks and the Titans and the Cowboys, and then the Vikings, Falcons and Eagles and Raiders and Bears are all 19 to 1. People have really put a lot of thought into making this a nuanced market here. Brad, any other teams that catch your interest here?
Yeah, so I'm glad you mentioned the Chargers not being a fit, because I agree. I don't really get why everyone keeps saying that. I think the Giants jump out to me. You know, you draft Wan'Dale Robinson last year. You've had all these smaller slot guys you cycled through, and Sterling Shepard and trading for Golden Tate. Those guys aren't there anymore. But you cut Kenny Galladay. You're going to cut Kenny Galladay, and you need that downfield separator. Go up and get it, jump ball guy for, Danny Dimes to throw to for the next 3-4 years, if not more. I think they make a lot of sense. Down the draft, you saw Daniel Jeremiah didn't even have Quentin Johnson in the first round in his first mock draft. I think he was late in the first in his second one. So I think the Giants are at 26, I want to say, but I don't think that's too far down. I think that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, no, Giants were the one that I was that I thought made sense as well, especially after you invest in Daniel Jones. I mean, you're going to pay that guy $40 million a year. You better want him to look good. And so, Dable saw this in Buffalo. Get your quarterback a good wide receiver, and things can happen. I'm not saying Daniel Jones is Josh Allen, to be very, very clear, but I think that thought process works in favor of them drafting Quentin Johnson. Let's go to Jahmyr Gibbs next. Because we've talked about Bijan Robinson ad nauseum. People are so excited putting him in the first round at 10 to the Eagles. Jahmyr Gibbs, the number one team on his list, and this is just a who's who of teams that the missing piece is just a running back. The Eagles plus 450, the Buffalo Bills at 5 to 1, the Kansas City Chiefs at 6 to 1, the Bengals, who all of a sudden are in need of a running back, at plus 750. The Ravens are 10 to 1, the Rams, the Cowboys, both 15 to 1. What do you like here, AJ?
Yeah, it's a weird one because I think Gibbs is probably a second rounder, and so it's tough to really guess where he's gonna go. I think a lot, the Eagles are smart enough to probably not take a running back in the first round, and so, but I wouldn't put money at plus 450. That's just not great value. I think one bet, which it's not actually even on the screenshot I sent you guys, but I think a team that could be interesting would be the Houston Texans or the New England Patriots, both at 34 to 1. You think about Bill O'Brien, right? Alabama OC. Patriots might let Damian Harris walk. Ramondre Stevenson is a great running back, but I think Bill Belichick's never been shy of implementing an RBBC. And I think if he's on the board and, they've kind of filled all their holes in free agency, I think that could be a good bet given his connection with Bill O'Brien. Now, I don't know if Belichick would invest that highly in a running back, which is why I think the Texans, who, have holes on their roster, they could just use talent in general. Also, Caserio probably has that Alabama connection with Bill O'Brien, could ask him about how his former star running back was in Alabama, could take him high in the second round. And I think those two would be kind of my long shot best, but I don't know if I'd really want to lay money on this one, because I think Gibbs is probably a second rounder, and kind of predicting that would be a little bit tricky there.
Yeah. I saw the Titans there at 34 to 1, and the news about Henry, potentially being on the trade block. I also think they'd be a dark horse to take Bijan Robinson way too high, but
the rationale is exactly why this is my favorite pick, in that I do think he's going to fall in that, DeAndre Swift and that range, Jonathan Taylor, all those guys that we've seen go early second. Is the New Orleans Saints, also because Alvin Kamara might be missing the first 6+ games of the season. We know they don't care about anything but getting, what they view as immediate contributors and don't really care about anything else. So they're picking at 29 and 40. So maybe they do take him very, very late in the first at 29. And if they don't, then he's there at 40. One other one, I don't know if you mentioned them, but the Carolina Panthers at 39. I think they want to bring Deontay Foreman back, but maybe you have all these extra picks. You trade away Christian McCaffrey, and you think you can kind of replace him with, I'm not comparing him to Christian McCaffrey, but, a guy that can catch the ball to the backfield, run routes out of the slot, all those things. So those two I like, because I agree with you. I think he falls into that early second round range. We've seen so many guys, Javonte Williams, I could name 10 more, Breece Hall, Kenneth Walker, yada, yada, yada.
Saints makes so much sense too, because the Jamar Gibbs comp is Alvin Kamara.
Right.
When you think about it, and I'm super fast. He's faster than Kamara was, but is shifty as hell. By the way, we are talking about draft props and all other types of bets in the PFF Printing Press Forecast Discord, whatever you want to call it. Hats have been sent out. Members of this team here now all have Printing Press hats. It doesn't fit quite on Brad's head. Maybe we'll make him put it up. There it is. Yeah, beautiful. And you can get yours by making your way to the Printing Press Discord. The link is in the description. We also post it on Twitter. You can DM us and get it there. Let's go to Anthony Richardson. Carolina Panthers plus 340. Seattle Seahawks plus 430. Interesting. Colts plus 470. Raiders plus 650. Texans plus 750. The Lions 10-1. The Falcons 11-1. Bears are 15-1, Commanders 16-1, Ravens are 23-1, as are the Bucks. All right, Arjun, let's start with you. What are you thinking on Rich?
Yeah. So, real quick, I just wanted to make a point on Brad's Panthers bet. I actually really like that as well. Thinking about Scott Fitterer with Seattle, take Rashad Penny in the first round. Indianapolis, Frank Reich takes Jonathan Taylor in the second round. So there is some precedent there. I really like that pick, and I'm gonna bet that right after we finish recording. But yeah, sorry. Going back to Anthony Richardson, earlier in the week before Lamar got the non-exclusive tag, I bet the Lions to take Anthony Richardson. I was like confident in that bet. I was like, okay, Holmes is someone who swings for the fences. He's not afraid to go for it. But now I'm a little bit wary just because I think the Lions haven't come out and said we're not out on Lamar Jackson. I think they could be in play for him. And so I'm not really too sure on the Lions anymore. I think a good bet would probably be the Indianapolis Colts. I think they're probably a team where Shane Steichen's worked with some of these toolsy quarterbacks in the past. He's worked with Jalen Hurts, who, in his second year, he was more of a run-first quarterback, and they developed an offense suited to his strengths as a runner. And I think Anthony Richardson could step into that same offense, where the Colts don't have a great offensive line, but they have good pieces: Braden Smith, Ryan Kelly, Quentin Nelson, Bernard Ryman. I think they have the pieces to establish a good run game, and then Richardson could kind of adjust to the NFL level if he starts week one with more of a run heavy scheme. So I think the Colts could be in play, and if they are the team that selects the third quarterback, I do think it would be Richardson over Levis. So I think I like the Colts in the spot at plus 470.
Those were the two teams. I think those are the two teams. But I think you were onto it in the beginning. I maybe even will wait for some people to bet some Lamar Jackson steam and then get some even better odds. I think Detroit makes all the sense in the world. I'm starting to wonder if the thing here is also you should only be looking at teams that you think can pick in the top three, because I think at this point there is a legitimate chance that I don't know what order it's going to be, but Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, and Anthony Richardson, I think could go off the board 1, 2, 3. And the Lions are obviously sitting at number 6. They have number 18, which is their own pick. 6 is the Rams pick. Jared Goff entering the final year of his contract, and it's just you bring in a guy that is also the thing too is they're a type of team with Dan Campbell and Ben Johnson. They would use him in like goal line packages in creative ways, even as a rookie, a completely different skill set. Seth gave a John Wolford a shout out, a nice deep pull on John Wolford for the Rams. But it's true. Sean McVay was legitimately giddy to have a quarterback that actually could move his legs and do things with it. So I love 10-1 for the Lions. I think I might go bet that as soon as we're done with the podcast.
A fan of it as well. Do you think the Falcons could get up into the top 3?
I think that's possible. And they were one of the teams that said they're out of Lamar. So, realistically, it's either make a move in the draft or start Desmond Ridder next year. And I shouldn't be too mean. I think Ridder is a solid player. But, maybe. Like I said, as long as you can get the 3 with Arizona, then I think you're a worthwhile bet in this market.
Yeah, that was the only other one. The Lions I love just because, as I mentioned previously, how convinced the Lions are that you do not break up a team that won a meaningless Week 18 game. You just don't do it. Okay. You do not do it. In Jared Goff, they trust. He's going to take them to the promised land. That you might, the bet is not Anthony Richardson to go to the Lions, Arjun. It's the Lions doing the Super Bowl. That's the bet that you want to place. Okay. Because Jared Goff is leading that unbeatable team to the Super Bowl next year. You can just bet on it. And Lions fans have never been wrong about anything. So it's important to call out. Any more draft props before we move on to the great game of golf?
I guess the last like kind of market that kind of popped up was the tight end market. I did see Dalton Kincaid earlier in the week to be the favorites. It wasn't like minus money, it was like around like plus 115. It's kind of flipped where Michael Mayer is now plus 115 on FanDuel and Kincaid is plus 145. I've kind of heard mixed reviews on both. Like I've heard some teams like Kincaid more than Mayer or Mayer. It could just be a scheme fit where Mayer's probably more of the all-around guy and Kincaid's more of the athletic, maybe like a Travis Kelce comp. I know that's I'm not a draft guy, but that's some things I've heard. But yeah, I think it's definitely depends on fit. And I don't know if I definitely think you could like arbit and get both guys at plus money. And I don't really think Darnell Washington is going to go before either of them. But, I was curious if you guys had any thoughts on that market.
I did. I'm glad you brought it up. And I actually do think I'll get to it, but Darnell Washington is intriguing to me. So I think Kincaid at this point, a lot of the draft analysts, Daniel Jeremiah, they've said Kincaid is probably the best tight end. If you're talking about a pass catching guy in today's NFL, that very, very interesting though. Charles McDonald, who I think has been on the podcast before, at 4Verts on Twitter, he did a poll of personnel execs in Indy, and he asked 7 different people at a bunch of different positions, like who's your number one prospect? All 7 said Michael Mayer. Now I don't know if he talked to only teams that want guys that can play in line. Yeah, no, I thought it was very interesting because you are starting to see the draft guys of the world that have now had Kincaid ahead of him in a lot of ways. Mayer didn't test incredibly well. It wasn't bad, but it wasn't off the charts. Kincaid, I don't think tested at all. All that said, I kind of don't hate the idea. I think it's kind of crazy in today's NFL. But Darnell Washington did test off the charts, had a 3-cone that rivaled players that weigh 60 pounds less than he does. Flashed some get up ability, had a one-handed catch on one of the drills, and literally is like an extended left tackle. So it's such you're betting on one team that just wants that player, sees it as a fit. But yeah, the uncertain, I said it last week with CJ Stroud going first overall, like I'm chasing all this uncertainty because I think there's too much certainty in a market that should be, that is volatile.
It's a good point. And you bring up the point around the top 3, around CJ Stroud potentially going 1. There is, I think, as a result of some of the things that happen in the combine, some of the things that we've seen with the quarterbacks moving around, there's, I think, a lot of opportunity for this to be a complete shit show in the top 10. Teams trading up left and right, teams trading down multiple times. I think we've already seen a couple of mocks with that. It makes sense. What's Washington at? I don't know.
Plus 380.
All right. Arjun, you ready to bet some golf?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. Brad, the Players Championship this weekend. Feed us.
Yes, many refer to it as the 5th major at beautiful TPC Sawgrass, and it's an awesome tournament. It has some famous holes. It's a fun one to watch if you're not big into golf. We talked about it before, but if you want to sit on the couch, maybe hungover and just pass the time, there's nothing better than watching golf. So that said, I have a winner for the whole tournament. I have a top 10, and I have a head-to-head matchup that I like. So we'll start with the winner. That is Xander Schauffele. Came in second in the Players Championship, his first time playing. Unfortunately, it was 2018. He's missed the cut every year since, but the most important metric, the metric that tracks the closest to if you're good in this area, then you're going to do all the players, is strokes gained on approach shots. It's not a super long course, but it can be narrow. It was designed by Pete Dye, which will be relevant for later. And there's some greens that have a lot of slopes. You can kind of, if you miss shots errantly, they'll roll off of false fronts and things like that. Schauffele, when he's on, and he's been phenomenal so far this year in strokes gained on approach shots. Like I said, missed the cut, but has the pedigree. Came in second here a couple of years ago. So he's 25-1 to win this thing, probably like 10th or so on the list of players. I mean, look, he's top 6 player in the world. A very, very good player. And I think when his game is on, he came in, I want to say 3rd, 10th, and 13th in 3 tournaments to start off the season, been playing well. So him 25-1 to win. Second
he gets
one.
Hot, by the way, like to your point, dude is streaky as hell.
super. He runs so hot and cold. But if you get him on a good weekend, he might light the field. So yeah. When I go on betting to win, I think it's such sucker bets to take anyone that's the 5 shortest odds. Like you got to. I'm not saying go for 100 to 1, but you're looking at 6 to 15 range. I think is where you actually kind of make some money. So the second one is Victor Hovland, top 10. Finished 9th last year. His ball striking, both off the tee, which here more about accuracy than about distance. Like I said, not the longest course, but has been hitting fairways and also is a good ball striker. Again, a guy that's kind of streaky, but when he's on, one of the best iron players in the country, in the world. And he's a very, very good player that I think is going to potentially just find his way into the contention here. Maybe doesn't win it, but finds his way into the top 10 here. And then the last one, probably my favorite of all the 3, frankly, it's a head-to-head matchup, and that is Shane Lowry plus 110 versus Colin Morikawa. So this gets back to, and I know that might sound crazy, betting against Colin Morikawa, one of the best young players in golf, but Lowry has back-to-back top 10s of this tournament. He is arguably the best player on tour on Pete Dye designed courses. And that sounds maybe funny to you, but there are a handful of names that design courses across the country. They have themes, they have tendencies. Pete Dye is probably, I don't know, top 5, top 3 most famous golf course designer. Whereas Morikawa the last 2 years came in 41st and missed the cut. It's not a great tournament for him. Hasn't been great here at this course. And at Pete Dye courses hasn't been phenomenal either. Again, a guy that could get hot and play very well, but I think this is a name recognition, I watched for Full Swing on Netflix recognition type bet. And I like getting Lowry here plus money in a matchup that I really like.
I love it. I absolutely love it. You brought in the designer of the golf course, and that is how that Brad knows what the fuck he's talking about. That was beautiful. I'm excited about this. I'm betting all 3 of them. Shane Lowry also is like the exact opposite of the type of golfer that I generally will bet on. But it's the right reason. That's the right reason to go put some on Shane Lowry. Arjun, do you have any questions for resident golf betting expert Brad Spielberger?
I do not. I'll be honest. I'm not old enough to sit in front of the TV and watch golf for 4 hours on a Sunday or Saturday morning, but I'll definitely be placing those bets along with you guys. And if it cashes, I'm going to need a celebratory text letting me know that we won, because I probably won't know otherwise.
That's entirely fair. That's entirely fair. Yeah, I would say one last point I should have mentioned. The big thing on this course, too, is you got to beat the par 5s. Like the scoring holes are the par 5s. Victor Hovland finished 9th last year and played the par 5s 1 under, which is not very good. Ooh. So if he actually does better where you're supposed to score on this course, I think it lines up very well. But anyway, Arjun, I will let you know, and trust me, my senior year of college is about where I started realizing I was washed, started watching golf. You're in that sweet spot, I promise.
I think you got a few years left in you, Arjun. I would like really try and stick it out. I knew I was getting older when the Masters is a great tournament. You don't have to be old to love the Masters, but I legitimately bought groceries to make myself like homemade pimento cheese. Now I was living in Cincinnati, which like it'll make you do some crazy shit because it's a wonderful place. But I made myself pimento cheese and sat at home and watched. They bumped the tournament up final round because it was the year Tiger was ended up winning, and they had thunderstorms. So they started at like 6 a.m. I'm eating like pimento cheese at like 6 I went to bed at like 9:30 the night before in anticipation. They re-aired the final round right after, and I just watched it again. And that was when I knew I was no longer in college.
Once you're in, man. Is there anything better? Hold on, George. Is there anything better than when you fall asleep at like noon and then you wake up and the final pairing is like the 5th or 6th hole?
It's a
and you're
good
just
feeling.
like, I have 2.5 hours of just high octane action in front of me. There's nothing better.
I will say this. I think Pacific time is a great time zone for golf because you get to watch golf while it's like still light out. And in the summer, it'll be like light out. It'll be like 5-6 p.m. and you don't feel like your day is over when it's like dark as shit outside. It's cold. You can't do anything. So yeah, Arjun, this is what you have to look forward to. Don't get old. Stay young. That was our podcast full of great advice on how to remain youthful. You can check us out on Wednesdays and Sundays. We'll be back Sunday night for for all of you. Go join the Discord. We love you all. Peace.